Hello, my name is Angela Cox and I am the Mindset Mentor, and this is the Mindset Mentor Meets podcast. Now, my aim is to discover and share the secrets of success. You'll hear engaging and uplifting interviews with business leaders at the top of their game, all primed to deliver bucketfuls of value and inspiration. We'll bring practical tips, success strategies, and golden nuggets of motivation to help you unleash your absolute potential. Now, please do like, share, and leave a review if you love this podcast. It really does help others to find us. Thanks for listening, and let's jump in now and meet this week's fabulous guest. Hello, dear listener. I hope you are keeping safe and well. Now, today I'm interviewing a complete stranger, which is always a lovely challenge for me. And a good friend of mine, the lovely Becky Cobb, suggested that I interview Phillip Cable. She described him as a complete inspiration. So I don't know whether he'd agree with that or not, but it's always nice to hear that about people. Now, Phillip is the CEO and the co-founder of a company called Mast. And Mast is a company on a mission to make the world a safer place to live and work. So looking forward to hearing about that. But Phillip's also got a fascinating background and career. He's worked in the Middle East, he's served in the Navy, and he also holds loads of academic qualifications in the area of law. So I can't wait to see how security and law and the Navy all fit together. Phillip, you're there in your home office, it looks like. It's an absolute joy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me on. Yes, slightly blushing at your introduction there in terms of wondering if it was actually me you were talking about.
Sure, it's
certainly happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's lovely to meet you. We haven't met before. We've had a quick 5-minute amble before we started recording. So this is two absolute strangers meeting for the first time. And I suggested to you that I was going to dig into your proudest moments, which is always tough for many of us to go there. So I can't wait to hear what you've come up with. So why don't we start with what I call the shake your pom-poms moment number 1, and you let me know what you're proud of.
I had to think about this last night, and I think the first thing that sprung to my mind was quite a pivotal moment in my life when I was training to be a solicitor, and I sort of realised early on at the age of 23, 24, it was a sort of early midlife crisis moment. And I took the risk and took the plunge to give the whole thing up against a lot of advice to the contrary at the time, because obviously it's a big commitment, isn't it, to study and all the rest of it, and to do what I'd always kind of wanted to do, which was something in the military. And I did my research, and it came down to, actually, I thought the Navy was going to be something that would suit me. And I've got no background. I had no background in it at all. Born in Barking in East London, it's not exactly close to the sea.
No.
The River Roding, but that's about it. And I think, that is a proud moment in many respects, because although obviously many people join the forces, it was the timing of it, giving it up, what I was previously doing. It also came in a difficult personal time in my life, because I'd only fairly recently lost my mother very suddenly.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of those sort of things where it all sort of came at once, and I just felt like, I needed to make that break. And it was a risk. It really was a significant risk, but I think it was the right one looking back. And so I think joining the Navy and, achieving certain milestones in the Navy, which didn't really come naturally to me in many respects. And I certainly, reading my reports back, which I kept, they don't pull punches. The reports start with things like, not a high flyer, not a natural seaman, but through sheer determination has achieved the aim. And so that, looking back, it was a short career. It was only nearly 6 years, but I do feel a certain pride at that. Having served my country, and it's something that I think that I would recommend to anybody. I think it will set you up for life. So that's my sort of proud moment, number one.
Oh, there's so many bits in there that I'd love to just explore with you a bit more, because it's interesting it was that way round. In my head, you were in the Navy first and then you studied law. I don't know why I thought that, but you studied law till the age of 23 and you got a master's, didn't you? You got...
That sort of came actually afterwards. Going back sort of a bit of a potted history of me, which is sort of relevant. I didn't follow the normal academic route. I was a know-it-all at school, thought I knew it all, obviously didn't, left at 16, and then went into work in the city for a few years, then went back and realised that I should probably do A-levels, did a bit of night school, then got to sort of the law degree route. It was very difficult because, of course, being a solicitor, you do need to have very high levels of academic success, which I sort of half had. It wasn't quite perfect. And so, yeah, I mean, and then I gave it up, and then I did the masters actually at the back end of my legal career, and I did it in maritime law because I thought that it would be sort of sensible to try and combine the two. So that's sort of how it fitted together.
So it's kind of going from one to the other and then back again and blending them all together. But
yeah,
at 23, making that decision to give up, was there lots of expectations around you coming from, family and coming from teachers and what have you, in terms of the decision that you made to give up?
Well, I think that it's it's a little bit like starting a business or taking a plunge to do something that, sometimes you just have to seize the initiative, seize the moment. There was a bit of pressure about that. Well, not so much from my father, who's always very supportive, but, some friends and certainly people in the industry, you're giving it up, you're nearly qualified, you've got, only sort of 6 to 8 months to go, once you give it up. But I spoke to a very close family friend of mine, a chap called Mick Vivian, not that matters, but, a real kind of East End character, very earthy character. And he was like, go for it, boy. It was that kind of, and I thought, well, actually, yeah, why not? I could always come back to the law later. Whereas if you don't join the forces at a certain time, you've had it. Once you're old, you can't turn the clock back. So it was a mixed set of advice, but I think instinctively I felt, yeah, it was the right thing.
So it's instinct driven. There's something in you.
Yeah,
saying.
I think, certain belief of wanting to serve sounds, but it was a little bit about wanting to serve the country, physically test you, travel the world, do the sorts of things that you just can't do in ordinary life. I mean, it's just as simple as that. There's no comparison to it. And all of those things, despite the obvious difficulties and sacrifices, are true. And I certainly don't look back. So that does, I suppose, remain one of the proudest things I think I've done.
Yeah, huge. I mean, there's a huge amount of courage in there to go from one thing to another. The military is such a tough environment at one level because there's also a massive element of discipline. Having been there myself, I know. But I'm also interested to hear, obviously, in the middle of this transition, you've lost your mum. So how do you muster the courage to do something new when you've had such a huge loss?
To be honest, it sort of threaded through my background a bit in that sort of determination. And I think that some people through adversity, go one of two ways. For me, it was very difficult. It was prior to that decision. Things weren't going quite right in my career. The sort of legal thing wasn't quite right for me. I wasn't at home. It was a very, very sudden death of my mother. The brain hemorrhage, unfortunately, which is, literally like the heart attack where you just are here 1 minute, gone the next. And she was only 54. So it was very sudden. But I think it sort of, in a way, galvanised my view that, we have one life, the sense of having to make the most of it. And it was a bit of a comfort in a way. I suppose it's a bit like when people of old used to join the Foreign Legion to run away from things. There was probably a bit of that with what I was doing. It felt like, right, I'm going to put myself to the test. And before the Navy, I then sort of joined the TA for a while. It was very tough. It was with the TA parachute regiment. So I did all that stuff up to P Company. Unfortunately, I failed it, but, in a sense, that's just part of the test. Sometimes you fail things and you have to just keep going. And unfortunately, I didn't meet the standard, but it was cathartic in some respects because it takes you out of your comfort zone. You really have to sort of push the boundaries and all of that. I think it sort of took my mind off the sort of obvious feelings of bereavement and loss that you suffer from losing a parent when you don't expect it.
Do you ever get over that? sense of bereavement and loss when it's happened so quickly?
I don't think you get over it as such. I think you just get used to it and you learn to use it and to sort of reflect on it more. I mean, I do still get a little bit choked from time to time thinking about it even now.
Yeah, I bet.
But I think that you sort of, I tend to do things kind of in my mother's honour, and I think, oh, well, she would have approved of that, or she would have thought well of that. And I see that the same in my children, in the sense of, we're quite a musical family as well, which is quite at odds with perhaps being in the military, perhaps. I mean, so I've always been in musical theatre. My mother was my late mother was so I've always been on the stage at an amateur level, singing and what have you. My mother was a classically trained singer and a pianist, and my children are sort of now becoming quite musical, and I'm thinking, oh, she'd be very proud of that. So I think you use loss to help you move on in life, actually. And that's the way I've always approached it.
There's that sense of strength, I suppose, that you gain from that as well. I mean, just hearing you say that you're musical, there's so many kind of dichotomies here in terms of everything that represents you in your life.
Yeah. I was in the ship's band. That was quite fun. Yeah. And actually, bizarrely, at the Britannia Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, which you don't necessarily associate with musicals, there was a bizarre period in our final term where we put on the production of Grease. And literally all of the officer cadets were amongst us. There was the band, the stage was created. One of my roommates was Kaniki. I was, Danny, Zuko.
You got the big role.
Yeah, I mean, bizarre, but I've done that ever since. And I do believe, I said sort of that eclectic kind of personality of doing lots of different things. I really believe in it. I don't think you need to just do one thing. I try and encourage that with my children.
Becky's right. This is inspiring stuff. And I'm just getting visions of you now in kind of the leather jacket with the collar up. It's brilliant. So, I mean,
I was actually in the Full Monty a few years ago as well, the stage version of it, which was really quite a bit of embarrassing. But anyway, that's another story. But that was quite fun, especially when you're sort of your stepdaughter and boyfriend and mother-in-law are in the audience. It's a bit awkward, But anyway.
You love it, really. You love it.
Fun. It was fun. It was fun.
So we've got, coming out of this kind of legal environment, deciding that wasn't for you before it had even begun to a certain extent, and then going into the Navy, serving, feeling that massive amount of pride. We've got this kind of amateur dramatics element to you. We've got the loss. I mean, I just can't even imagine what your second proudest moment is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit like I'm quite proud of myself for not letting failure stop me. I know that sounds like a strange thing because we're talking here about success, but I do think it's important not to fear failure and to be, not able to admit it. And I think that I'm quite proud of the fact that I really do not give up. And I don't consider myself to be a high flyer, and I don't consider myself to be that good at that many things, but I do think that you can achieve a lot through just sheer persistence.
And you just said about the TA, didn't you? That you failed in the TA, and yet you got up again.
Yeah, and it was disappointing, but I think that you've probably heard of the sort of phrase water mitty, isn't there, where people pretend they do things and then because they sort of. Whereas I've always been, I've been surrounded by military people who are veterans of campaigns and been in the military for 20, 30 years at sort of a very significant level, special forces, etc. And of course, but you just have to just accept that you didn't reach the bar at that point. And it was very difficult. It was just very disappointing to put yourself through that misery and then not get the end. But you've got to look at it, I didn't meet the standard. But you take that and you use it. And the fact is, I still experienced it. I still did it. I just didn't quite get it, and I don't feel you can be too disappointed at that because most people wouldn't even be able to get to the start line.
It's so true.
So I feel that, that, and I think the other areas of failure, I mean, in some respects, even in the Navy, I didn't achieve what I wanted to. I put myself forward for the mine clearance diving officers course. I was a ship's diver. I was a bridge watch keeper, the standard things in the Navy. And I put myself forward for that course. And it's a 3-month intensive diving program, mixed gas, closed circuit things, a lot of physical elements, a lot of supervision. And I failed in the last 2 weeks of the 3-month course. And it's pretty devastating at the time, because
Mm.
obviously you just think this is just a disaster. But, I just thought to myself, look, it's not worked. It's not happened. I don't want to just sit around in the Navy ad infinitum. I see there's a future somewhere else. And then I decided to put my notice in and then think, right, I'm going to try and move on to something else. So I feel that actually I've failed quite a lot of things, but I feel quite proud of myself for not letting that deter me from picking myself up and just
Yeah.
moving
Bouncing
on to
forwards.
something else. And that's something that I think that you can learn from, in the sense that take it on the chin, and really just get on with it. So that's my sort of, I suppose, proud of. It's not really a particular moment, it's just more of a theme throughout my
Yes.
life, really, a theme that I feel quite proud of.
And it's a good thing to be proud of, particularly I think for men, because often, I mean, I work with men and women, and often it's men who are challenged by failure and their
Yeah,
response to it a lot more than women.
yeah,
And yet what you're saying is a very interesting process that you go through, because before you can have that conversation with yourself that says, right, it's not worked, what am I going to do next? You said you allowed yourself to feel it. So it's rubbish and it's horrible and, it stings and it hurts and that kind of horrible sense of rejection, I suppose, that we get from that feeling of failure, both from the
yes,
judgment of others and the judgment of ourselves. And I think what's interesting about what I heard from you is you allow yourself to do that bit, which is really important in
yes, I
allowing
agree.
ourselves to then bounce forwards.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's also quite important, and I don't know if this is a modern sort of trait, but there is always a sense that people are trying to look for reasons of which it wasn't their fault why they failed or why they
Yeah.
didn't achieve something, whereas actually sometimes it can be just that something that you've done or not done, or something that was in your gift, or just you're just not quite at that level, not quite good enough, because you can't be good at everything. There's only one, I don't know, footballer at that level, or athlete, or successful singer,
Yeah,
or whatever
it's so
else. And I think that, so it is, you do sort of try and look for reasons, and there are often more than one reason, but ultimately you've only got yourself
to hold
that could have
accountable.
got there. And so and
Yeah.
I think you see it in sportsmen, don't you, and women, everyone, all sportsmen and women fail at some point. Very rare for them to be, undefeated or whatever.
Yeah,
And it's how they
totally.
deal with that. And some people can come back, some people don't.
But you have. And what's interesting, I think, when you look at that element of failure is, at the time it can feel crushing and you've got to pick yourself up and move on. And I always think it's interesting to look at what comes after failure, because you could have gone down one path of, being the diver or whatever, but because that was closed, that door for you, what
Yeah,
did you go on to do next? And actually, was
yeah.
that better than what was going to happen before?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, looking back on it, it probably was a good thing, because I then decided to leave the
Yeah.
Navy, put my notice in, and then in traditional RN style, they send you down somewhere that no one wants to be. So I was in the Falklands for 7 months,
Oh my God.
which was it was interesting, to be fair. I did enjoy it, despite it being a long way from home for a long period. And when I left, it was also then a tricky period of re-establishing myself, because actually that was quite harsh, because you go from being in a position of authority and having a certain feeling about life and being proud, to actually trying to find a job.
Yeah.
And it's really quite difficult to readjust. But I was determined, and I just thought I didn't mind. I just, delivering leaflets for a period of time, and then, just doing all sorts of odd type of jobs, and some paralegal work. And then I stumbled on some security work for a company that is called Aegis, they actually eventually became very, very big, and were bought out actually by Garda World, I think it was, some time back. And I learned a lot from the founders of that business through seeing their growth for an early stages. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I think that I could do this. Not better, but I thought not at all. But I thought I'd like to do this, have my own business. I always found it interesting.
I love this about you. You just see an opportunity and go for it.
Yeah, I met my business partner, co-founder, man of great experience, Phil Batty, who was 18 years at Hereford and that kind of pedigree. And I met him on a super yacht project we were doing with some teaching and some courses, security courses, and we met in Palma, Mallorca. Yeah, random, and we just kept in touch. And I think that we saw in each other, and he's 17 years older than me, so we were quite different, but we saw in each other things that we equally didn't have. I was more of like the office person and the sort of business side of it with law and a bit of military experience, and he was much more the operational, more gravitas, more client facing, and we just struck up a friendship. He already had the name Mast because he'd set up a bit of a consulting thing, and then we just sort of thought, why don't we just do this properly together? And it was another leap of faith.
And when was that?
That was in 2005.
Wow.
And so, again, another giving up something, a risk, giving up the job to sort of no salary.
How do you make a decision like that?
Yeah, well,
because you're a family man as well.
Yeah, well,
not then, maybe.
I'll probably be open about my past. I was actually married before. This is my second marriage, and actually, even my first wife was very, very supportive of that, and I'm grateful for that. And so, you have to work it through together, don't you? As to who's going to be able to cope, can you pay the bills, and so on. And yeah, and don't earn anything for a while, do you?
No.
You start your own business, it's a very lonely place. Totally lonely.
Especially coming from something like the Navy. I know you'd been out of that for a while, but the Navy, there's such a sense of belonging. And Steve, one of our guests a few weeks ago, was talking about, you're looked after. Every single need that you have is catered to. You come out of that and you're already kind of bewildered. But then you're also putting your security at risk, your financial security at risk, and taking another massive step.
Yeah. I think that sometimes I've tried to view it, though, that you look at what's the worst case scenario. And again, you need to look at can you fall back on something? I've never been one to back your house and shirt and everything on something. I think that you need to have some sort of reserve to fall back on. What is the worst case? Well, the worst case is, could I still live here and make ends meet? Yes. So and I haven't got any savings. Yes, I've got a bit of savings. So I think that there's it's a calculated risk.
Yeah.
It's not a reckless risk.
Considered.
Yeah, it's a considered one. And I think that you have to give up things to be able to gain things, I think, when you start a business, because you just simply, it doesn't happen overnight. It can take years. And I think that, that's what entrepreneurs, I suppose, have that sort of instinct about. And I think the love of it, if you look at people that are successful, I suppose, it's partly a love of it rather than necessarily because they think they're going to make any money out of it.
And that doesn't mean that you're not working hard because you love doing something. It just means that you don't mind putting the graft in.
Correct.
To actually make it into something. So tell me about Mast now then, because we're sort of 15, 16, 17 years down the line. My maths is shocking. Yeah,
I mean, it's again, that's been a journey and a half. I've had this sort of full support of my wife, who wasn't at the time because I got divorced, and then fortunately these things happen.
Second marriages are always best, though. I can say that.
Yeah, it's difficult. I don't have any regrets because I don't like to think it in that way. But I think I feel a bit more mature, a bit more settled in my own mind in some ways. And so that's been a great help and strength through the business, because I've always felt, even in the very, very dark down days of running a business, that you sort of come back to what's really important, actually. So it gives you quite a good anchor point. But there's been a lot of down times with the business, because we had period of exponential growth and that sort of excitement around a certain sector where you could just, it doesn't matter how, you could be completely stupid and still make money. It's almost like that, a bit like the .com boom.
Yeah.
And then you get into the sort of where it plateaus, and then it starts getting serious, and then things go wrong, and that's where you really have to draw upon your skills and other people's skills, quite frankly. And there was a period of considerable restructuring, which in reality means cutting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The euphemism for cutting. So and that period of restructuring was a very, very interesting learning period, because I think it's when you really understand about how businesses work and what you really need to do. And then the sort of third phase of Mast, I suppose, has been regrouping and properly diversifying and professionalizing certain elements of what we're doing, recognizing that what we did before is not going to be for the future, and actually starting up a new areas of the company. And your friend that you mentioned earlier, Becky, is a sort of key part of that, in the sense that we used to look much more at maritime and only maritime. Now we're actually soon to launch a new website where it's land and sea.
Nice.
So we're still involved with the maritime stuff, security, West Africa, Indian Ocean, all those sort of interesting things. But we also now look on our doorstep and think, there's a lot of stuff in the UK that we can gainfully do, and we are doing. So, we're on the sort of trajectory of growth again. We're not as big as we once were, but I think we've got a good chance.
And we're back in that pattern that you have of kind of seizing opportunities, seeing them, and then allowing yourself to go there. It's a real, I've heard it 3 or 4 times already today.
Yes, well, I think also, and I follow quite a lot of these sort of business leaders on YouTube and Facebook or what have you, and I think that it's really interesting to listen to some of these very, very successful people who constantly remind you that it's, in fact, as a business owner or entrepreneur, you almost work for the people around you rather than the other way around.
Yeah,
in the sense of
that service.
There's Gary Vaynerchuk, the extremely successful, very kind of straightforward talking American chap. Says that. And I think it's true. You have to recognize the people around you are going to be the ones that are going to do the business, really. And you're just tweaking the levers and looking at the sort of direction and strategy. And I think culture, actually, of the business is vital.
Oh, absolutely.
And diversity. I really believe that. If you look at the culture of things, it sets the tone, sets the scene, really.
And you'll be the creator of the culture ultimately, because it'll come from you. But what's interesting for me looking at your business, as I did in setup for this, is the diversity of it. Because, so often in the security sector, you do get that horrible term that is being bandied around now, the pale, male, stale term. But actually, that isn't what you see when you open up your website and you look at your people at a senior level. There's a real mix of diversity there, which is great.
The worry about that, though, and it has been a challenge, is that how do you then pitch your offerings, your wares? And sometimes diversifying, as I've seen in the past, can distract you from what the core of the business is and the actual value creating elements of the business. And it can be destroyed by these things you think might work, and they're bringing it down. So it's been quite challenging to get that right. And I don't think we've quite hit the mix at the minute. We're not quite big enough. It's that kind of position where you think, right, okay, well, we think we've got the right recipe, but we just
still experimenting
a bit more often. And it ever changing, isn't it? Globalization has changed the world. I think the pandemic's changed it further. You can't really assume anything anymore. I think everyone is becoming an expert because of Google, in a sense, and everyone can find a better deal. It's great in some ways for consumers, but it just makes it extraordinarily difficult in some ways for certain sectors.
There's a huge dose of humility that sits behind you that is coming through everything that you say. So there isn't this sense that you've already made it, you've already got it, you're all brilliant at it. You're coming to this saying, actually, it can be tough and it is hard and we've not nailed it. And that shows that kind of relentless pursuit of whatever perfection might be, and that you don't believe that you've got there, which is good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably one of my faults with that, and I think in a sense, unfortunately, the culture of Mast has never been quite, I wouldn't say aggressive because that's probably the wrong word, but I think it probably could be more
tenacious, maybe
forward-leaning and more sales-focused sometimes. We've been more about delivery of, and sometimes you need to be a bit more, I wouldn't say arrogant, but a bit more forward-leaning, as you said, about we actually know what we're talking about here and we're better than these people. So I think that would be the one area that we need to improve on.
But you've recognised that, so that's the first step, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
So what about the third one then? We might have covered it already, but is it different?
Touched on it. I mean, I'm quite, from a personal perspective, I am quite proud of my family. I think, where I've got to, I can't deny that is an important part of a person.
Yeah.
So I'm quite proud. Although they're maddening, aren't they, children?
You've got 4 boys, haven't you? And then a stepdaughter.
So I've got stepdaughter 4, and then 4 sons, 10, 8, 7, and 4. So it's a pretty busy household. Lots of fighting.
It's just unbelievable. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, it's hellishly expensive as well, isn't it? But no, I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of my wife as well. I think, the way she's got a very interesting story, actually, to be honest, as well. Comes from a very sort of ordinary background, had a child young, and so on, and it's also music and drama teacher, and so she's also got a fascinating story and has been very supportive. So I'm quite proud of that whole setup, and I suppose the anchor that it gives to me when I'm away or whatever I'm doing. It feels like it's a sort of reason, apart from being a business person is a good thing and it's exciting, but it's also there's a sort of reason.
There's a purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give these boys of yours then as they start to grow up and make their decisions about life?
Well, I'm kind of already doing it with them, and I'm saying to them, look, you've been given a good opportunity with me and your mum and the setup, but it's about that determination, I think. I think that, do not take anything for granted. You will find things difficult in life. One of the boys, my oldest son, William, is dyslexic, which is very difficult. But don't give up. Look at the successful dyslexics out there, and there's a lot of them. You just have different talents. So I think that, that sense of, the things that I've been proud of about not letting failure stop you. Don't give up, absolutely tenacious, keep going.
I love that. Would that be part of your secret to success then, would you say?
Yes, I think that it is. The tenacity, the constant fine-tuning, not an over belief of your own ability, think to others and reach out to others. But certainly I do believe determination and tenacity is an important feature of success.
It's funny, I've written the word determined down. Yeah. And courageous down for you. I mean, that's just you in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of courageous, I tend to think of some sort of courageous in a military sense, and I don't feel that. But I suppose courageous in a more limited way, yes, because there's been a lot of roadblocks along the way. Yes, of course, many others have had many more, but certainly, I don't give up easily, and I'm not shaken by the sort of failure of it. I think you can always strip it back down to what things are important, family. I am a religious person. I do have a Christian faith, wavers, but it's there in the background, which I think is also quite an important anchor, I have to say, in modern life. And I think even if there's doubts, it's Pascal's wager concept. You think that there's possibly something. Why discount it? So I think that those sort of features are an important aspect of success, because I think if you back the horse and it's so important that nothing else matters, then when it's so much risk, and then you think, well, I can't cope. Whereas if you think, well, look, I'm going to give this my best, business or whatever, and it doesn't work out, and so what? Still got family, I've still got roof over my head, I've still got, that kind of thing, sort of what they say on Titanic, air in my lungs or whatever. Yeah. Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's a good philosophy, isn't it? Because ultimately none of it matters.
The thing I really pick up on, and it's rare actually for somebody in your position, the head of a successful company and the career that you have, there's a real crushing of the ego. Your ego isn't coming out front and center before you, the human being. It's almost like you've been able to push the ego aside, and you're able to come with, the things that have gone wrong and the things that you've learned along the way, and you're able to share those in this kind of vulnerable way, if we want to use that word. But actually coming with these lessons of, it does take that determination to not give up, to get back up again and to try something else. And it's through those kind of relentless, I'm going to get up and go again, that you've created the success that you are enjoying. And what you're saying is, it's not always easy. Even when you run in a big company, there are times when it's tough and there are times when it's great, and you're having to roll with those punches.
Yeah, I think that sometimes humility and showing weakness can actually be quite a strong thing to do.
Totally, it can.
I mean, there's a balance, of course, because you don't want to give people, and sometimes perhaps I can be too honest about it, and that can shake some people because they then fear for their jobs or whatever, but in other circumstances. But I do feel that when you get people that are just a big I am and are arrogant, it just can be quite off-putting.
I totally agree.
And I think you look at leaders throughout history. I mean, although they're often quite humble people, and they do show humility and stuff like that. So I think it's a fine balance, but certainly that's the way I think. You've got to be natural, haven't you? You've got to be natural to yourself. You've got to be who you are. And everyone's got a style. Everyone's got. You can't fake it.
So we're back to my favourite word, authenticity.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's who you are, personified. Yeah. It's brilliant.
I like to try to be authentic. Yeah,
it's brilliant, honestly.
And I think you've got to laugh at yourself as well. I mean, in business, in life, I just think if you can't laugh at yourself, it's a problem. I mean, I think that humour and being humble can you can still tell someone off and criticise them, can't you? And actually do it with a sort of smile. Actually,
yeah, do it with that heart bit as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, do you know, Becky, when she wrote to me, and as I said, she said, "Oh, this guy, you need to interview him. He's really inspirational." And you really are. And not in the kind of, you're not coming on.
I'm not paying you for this interview either.
You've come on and you've shared a really inspirational story, but in a way that so many people will be able to relate to, because it's accessible to all of us. It's not sort of I've made billions of pounds or I've saved 25 lives. It's, I've had one setback after another setback and I've got up again and actually just kept clawing your way up.
Yeah. I think most people can do something similar, really, if I'm honest, in whatever career or whatever path they choose. I mean, when you sort of said the question about what is success, I mean, it again, it depends on your definition, doesn't it? And some people's success can be financial, some can be, philanthropic or service in some way, and that's right for you, isn't it? For the individual, that's what success is. It's what you set for yourself, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, just do you.
Don't be disheartened by, don't set yourself. That's everything, Be happy, I suppose. Be happy with yourself, in your own skin.
Be happy with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, don't you? I mean, you just otherwise you can be a lot. What they say, you're a long time dead. I mean, it's that sense, isn't it? I mean, you have to be grateful, I suppose.
Yeah, and seize the day. I like that kind of element of you, seize the day. But be happy with you in your own skin. I think that is the quote of the podcast. Philip, it has been an absolute joy. Thank you very much for being so open and honest.
Pleasure. It was fascinating to talk to you, and it's delighted.
It's been a joy. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much. I do hope that you enjoyed listening to the Mindset Mentor Meets podcast. If you did, be sure to check out the show notes to access all of those important links. For more about me, visit my website at www.angela-cox.co.uk. Now, I'd really love it if you could subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode, and do leave us a 5-star review because it really helps us to get noticed. Bye for now. I do hope that you'll tune in next week and take good care.